Hi, I'm Rick, and I want to show you what my world of chess is all about. I got chess from the East, chess from the West, chess from ancient times, chess from recent times, chess from different countries. I want to show you that chess is a huge intercultural world civilization phenomenon, and I love it. I'd really like to share it with you. You're probably all familiar with what we call chess nowadays. This is really the European kind of chess. It's now considered the international chess just because of the aftermath of colonization. European cultures spread all around: king, queen, bishop, knight, rook, pawn. These pieces have different identities even within the European realm. This could be, we call it a bishop, it could be a runner, it could be a fool, it could be an alfil, which you might not even know what it means, but it's from an ancient Arabic word. Well, we're going to go way beyond that. That kind of chess has been around for about 500 years, but it didn't always look like that. Here's an example. This is one of my favorites. This is the a set made for the Cigar Divan on the Strand, made by the same company that spearheaded this set. This was made popular by Howard Staunton. Some people say he was instrumental in the design of it. It's only been around for about 160 years. That's only about a tenth of the history of chess, so let's get deeper into it. I really like this design, by the way, and if this had become this international standard, I would have been quite happy. As it turned out, this one won out, and so now at least everybody knows what's what. But you could play with this one very well. Well, let's go back a little further. About 500 years ago, this painting was made with an unusual kind of chess. It was played on an 8x12 board. Well, this is called courier chess. It actually existed in Central Europe for about 600 years. So this was a very popular form of chess, or very widespread in any case, very long-lasting. And this set is actually remade from the set shown in this painting. This is by Lucas van Leyden, Dutch master, when he was a teenager. That's right. So, fantastic set, remade now. The rules are very interesting. It's got the ancient chess rules with these guys, the new chess rules with this guy. The queen has the ancient rules. This is a different kind of guy. This is a different kind of guy, a jester, a king's man. Well, I've got another website about that, so let's just move along here. This is the most famous chess find in the world. Well, this is a reproduction, of course. The originals are mostly in the Museum of London. This is the Isle of Lewis chess design. 4 almost complete sets of pieces were found in 1831, dating back from the late 12th century, probably made in Trondheim, Norway. These would have been played with the ancient chess rules, where the queen only moved 1 square diagonally. The bishop moved 2 squares diagonally. Very peculiar, and kind of a big question mark in the evolution of chess. How did they get that way? Now, jumping back to the time period of this painting, right around 1500, a manuscript was made by Pacioli, a good friend of Leonardo da Vinci. They were living together at the time, so we think da Vinci probably, almost certainly, knew of this chess set. He may have even been involved in designing or drawing the diagram, and this set has been remade from the drawings shown in that little book. It was recently discovered, so it's a new thing in chess, is a 500-year-old chess set. So where did the European chess form come from? Well, the Europeans got chess up from the Arab world. It was very widespread all across the Muslim realm, well before it was established in Europe. And that chess looked like this. This is a reproduction of a set made from archaeological find in Iran. At that time, Persia, the town of or city of Nishapur, Persia. And as I was saying, this game was played with the different rules. The bishops moved 2 squares diagonally. That means one of these guys could only get to 8 squares on the entire board of 64 squares. Very strange by modern standards. The queen moved 1 square diagonally, and that's how she moved all throughout Europe too, until the new chess took hold about 500 years ago. This new idea of the queen having all this power, the queen being able to zoom all across the board, that was called the chess of the Mad Queen, or the Queen's Chess. It was such a revolution. This set probably played both games, the old game and the new one, because it was right on the apex of that change. This would have certainly played by the old rules. And this reproduction is actually from the mid-9th century, or the original was from the mid-9th century. So there you go. This is kind of small because they're the actual size of the pieces. The Arab game, which was so widespread, also changed its form of pieces. This is generally known as the Muslim style of chessmen. They look almost exactly the same, except just longer, squatter, wider, taller. The same design, just slightly pushed out in different ways. And for somebody not familiar with this, it would be very difficult to tell like the difference between like which one of these is the rook or the knight. And the bishop apparently is the tall one, but I'm not even certain actually. And if you look at a few different Muslim sets, you'll see they vary in different ways. But the standard is that they're these lathe-turned designs with no elaborations, no knight's heads, for instance. And it is said that that is a part of the ban in the Quran against what they call engraved figures or engraved forms. But that's not necessarily true, because Muslim culture is very diverse, and some have statues, some have illustrations and books and so on. So, you know, it's in any case, this is a style. And another thing that's very dominant in Muslim culture is a great appreciation of geometry and symmetry, and so that also shows in this kind of design. Now let's see, where's our map here? Here's the Philippines down here. Interestingly enough, the southern Philippines were colonized by Arab travelers around 1500. There we go again, the year 1500. Very crucial time in the history of humanity. And when it came to the Philippines, you see, they still had these geometric forms. These are a little more, I don't know, they're sort of modernized, but typically you can see that they're all geometric. But in the Philippines and the Moranao society, this kind of shape was very popular. It symbolized power, it symbolized the wind, it symbolized the forces of nature, it symbolized high social status, and that became the knight's figure. And they're all carved differently. These sets are unique, one set to another, but they have this great flowing symbolic figure as the knight. So that's basically the line that chess took from Persia across the Arab parts of the world up into Europe. Here's a little diversion though. When this was so popular in Persia, it basically looked like this. When it became the Arabic game, for some reason the king and queen switched so that they were facing each other instead of crosswise to each other. Very small difference, but the game was basically the same otherwise. Here's the diversion I was talking about, a 4-player game. Now, this is kind of interesting because you can see how 2 armies of 8 pieces each like this could come together and make a single army of, you know, the configuration that we're used to, right? If they came together, they'd be like that. So what's going on with this? There's been a lot of speculation over the course of chess history studies that this game predated this game. But listen to me now, because you're going to hear contradictions about this, and the best evidence is that this game was just a variant of this game. It was played with dice. The dice, you see this figure, it shows you a ship or an elephant or a horse or the choice of a king and pawn. This has been adapted, by the way, very nicely by an organization called Front Porch Classics Incorporated. They don't make this anymore, but it's very nice that they recreated this for us. The figures are not particularly figures that they would have used in those days. It was just kind of a modern invention of recreating an old game. So very nice job, and as I was saying, chess did not, by all basically good accounts, start as a four-player game, but in the course of discovering chess history, many chess historians, many people found it so tempting, the idea that the two armies came together, especially since the name of the game was chaturanga, which means four arms. Well, that has a different meaning. It also meant the army of four different groups, which is, the elephants, the horse. In this case, it's a ship, but often in many versions it's a camel. And in many types of chess, these two are switched around. There have been a lot of shufflings, and I can't really get into them, but I'm working on a book that does get into those, so bear with me, and I'll give you resources as well as information here. Anyway, great game, played with dice, bit of gambling involved, directly related to the main type of chess. In Persia, chaturanga changed to shatranj in Arabic, just basically based on the difference between the pronunciations of the two languages. This says chaturanga, but it's usually known nowadays as chaturaji to specify the four-player game. But there's a whole different version of chess in the East, a whole different lineage of chess. Let's start with the one that's more like what we're familiar with. This looks a lot like chess. Nice lathe-formed figures, turned figures. Notice that the pawns are a row ahead. They look sort of like little checkers. This is the Thai form of chess. And like most forms of chess, the knight and rook are the same all around the world. The queen has that little one square diagonal move. The bishop has the traditional, well, I'll call it the Burmese elephant move. It can move one square diagonally or one square forward. They say it's the five appendages, the four legs or the trunk, indicate the directions, the five directions this guy can move. He's generally considered a nobleman in translation. This game is very popular still in Thailand. The older manuscripts call it Siamese chess. We now call it Thai chess. Cambodia has the same chess tradition, but the figures are just a little bit different in the Cambodian style. But Cambodians and Thai players can play together with no problem. You can see the relationship between the old Persian game and the Thai game. Now, consider that those pawns moving on the forward row also exist in these other games from Asia. Chinese chess, xiangqi, is said to be the most played board game in the world. That's right, even more than the chess we know and love, because there are so many Chinese people and so many of them play this game. This game is very dynamic. The rook and knight are basically like ours. The elephant piece moves two squares diagonally, as I was saying, the others do. This piece moves one square diagonally, but look, it's symmetrical, so the king has two assistants, then it spreads out symmetrically this way. This one's got firepower, cannons here, which have the rooks move, but they capture by jumping over to the captured piece. The pieces on the other side are a little bit different in their calligraphy, although this one is mostly the same, but the elephant piece, the king, central king piece, are different. Actually, in this game, you don't have the king or the emperor on a chessboard. That would be an insult, and they probably cut your head off. You have the general in the Chinese game fighting against another army led by a general or a governor. So let me just quickly diverge to this. Looks the same pretty much, doesn't it? Well, the pieces are not all the same size. They're bigger and smaller. And they're octagonal instead of round. And these are the traditional Chinese characters, but these are a little bit different. Well, this is the Korean game, and besides those subtle differences in the way the pieces appear, almost every piece in this game moves differently from the way it moved in the Chinese game, at least somewhat differently. Very interesting is that the elephant piece moves one space forward or sideways and then 2 spaces diagonally. It's like an extended knight's move. It goes from here to there, and it can be blocked if there happened to be something there. Well, it wouldn't be that, but if there happened to be something there on this place, it could not go boom over it. It would be blocked. It couldn't go this way either because it's blocked by that, blocked by this that way. This piece cannot move at all. Can't go this way either. It's blocked by that and that. So just to give you some idea, this game, though it looks very similar to the Chinese game, has very different moves. I call this the Gangnam style of chess because this is the Korean chess and this is what they would be playing in Gangnam, Korea. That's the style. Now, remember I mentioned in this game that the pawns are forward. Also interesting is that the pawns flip over when they promote and they become the queen piece, moving 1 square diagonally. So in that style of promotion is not such a big deal as it is in our Chess of the Mad Queen. This is similar in a way to the Japanese chess, which also starts with its pawns on the forward row. Now, Westerners like me, don't be so surprised that these Asian forms have calligraphy. This is the artistry of Asia. While we can understand things that are figurative and made in great carving styles, calligraphy is also a great artistic style, and so it's totally natural that essentially the same kind of game just takes on this very different appearance simply because of the prevailing artistic styles of the culture that's a part of. The king moves like a king, the knight moves like a knight except forward, the rook moves like a rook except only forward. These are 2 generals, a gold and a silver general. This is essentially the king or the jade general, especially. There's a little small artistic difference between the 2 generals. This means the jade or the jewel general. This means the gold general. This means the silver general. In any case, they have simple moves where they're a little different from the others. This one has the same as that Burmese elephant move I was telling you about. This one moves 1 square forward, backward, or sideways, or forward diagonal. Much preference for moving forward in this game. And the thing that really characterizes this and makes it the most complicated of all the chess forms is that almost all the pieces, when they get to the other side of the board, or to the last 3 rows actually of the other side, they flip over and they have different values, more powerful values than they had in their original state. This one does not flip over because he's already the gold general, which is pretty much the most powerful simple piece. And when they flip over, this value is a little more sort of cursive written. You know, you can see that these are more the old block style. For some reason, it helps the eye to just see the promoted piece as a cursive value. It makes it a little more clear. Some Japanese chess sets have the upside down, the back side written in red, which even more helps show the difference between the original value and the promoted value. Anyway, it's not so difficult to get used to these for a Westerner. People kind of freak out sometimes about, oh, it's so Chinesey, it's ching chong, whatever, I can't get it.
you can get it. You can learn to identify these pieces. You know, I even tell people, look, this sort of looks like it has a B for bishop. It moves like a bishop. This sort of looks like it has an R for rook. It moves like a rook. You can get it. This means horse, and it has like 4 little dots that represent the horse's legs. Okay, there's a lot of ways you can learn to understand this well enough to play the Asian forms of chess. And this one is just amazing. Oh, the other thing about Japanese chess that really makes it more complicated is that when you capture your opponent's piece, you just put it over on the side of the board. And for one of your moves, you can put it back down on the board. And so all the pieces that get captured, get replayed, they're always being recycled. Wonderfully dynamic. So, okay, with that diversion, I should mention that all of these are, this is very popular still in Japan. This is very popular, as I said, in China and Chinese-speaking places. This is very popular still in Korea. This is very popular still in Thailand. But some things most of the chess forms that ever existed have fallen through the cracks and are only available through historic recreations. Let me just take you on a few different little detours now. From the ancient form of chess, probably from something like this, came the Mongol form of chess. Now the Mongol tradition is to have chess pieces carved out of, well, wood, ivory, whatever, but just hand carved, and then have those pieces passed down from generation to generation. This is an authentic set with pieces that, you know, were carved a long time ago. I don't know how long ago, but they were then handed down, you know, from one generation to the next. The traditional Mongolian pieces can represent very different things, but in general, the king is the king or the Khan. The queen is usually one of these lion figures. If you're familiar with the Chinese tradition and other Asian traditions, there's a sort of a lion-dog figure. It's really a mythic beast, but it has great symbolic meaning and so important, in fact, that it's the king's companion in this game. The bishop is a camel with 2 humps. Interesting, because the Indian tradition has a camel with 1 hump. This one's got the 2 humps in the Mongol. A horse is a horse, of course, and the rook is some kind of a vehicle. This is a kind of a cart. Is it being pulled by a little block guy? I don't know, but the rook in the Mongol game can be all kinds of things. It could be a karmic wheel, or a bunch of fish, or a bunch of peacock feathers, or a yin-yang symbol, many things. Now the pawns are usually some kind of small animal, and often as not they're small, these little lion critters, because they're theoretically the offspring of the mother lion. So this game also has its own rules. It's very similar to, well, it's related to the ancient chess, but the queen is very interesting. It moves like the old queen, but also like a rook, so it's much more powerful. There are a lot of special rules about how you have to checkmate your opponent and which checkmates are more valuable than others. But a very long-standing, very deeply rooted chess tradition. There's also a form of Mongolian chess that is played on a 10 by 10 board, so there's a whole other story about that. As I'm saying, I'm kind of breezing over the many variations that have occurred throughout history because there's just so much ground to cover. Burma, also known as Myanmar, also has its own form of chess. Now, in this form of chess, the pieces are carved like this, and in this form of chess, the pieces are placed on the board by the players. The players set up their whole arrangement before they begin playing. So that's a very interesting thing. It gets the game going more quickly. And now in this particular set, they're using the Ramayana style, which is making the pieces represent the conflicting forces in the Ramayana drama of the Indian tradition. This is a monkey here, and this guy is a little demon guy. So that's the little concession to the traditional literature. Okay, now just traveling on here. India, many people say India is where chess began. There's a bit of ambiguity about that, because as you go back further and further in the history of chess, you find that chess was just kind of existing along the Silk Road, and they find a few odd pieces here and there. In India, they find some pieces that could have been chess pieces, might not be, and there's a lot of evidence with contradictory suggestions, because chess existed before people were writing about it. It was widespread before people were writing about it. So anyway, as I was saying, most people say that chess began in India. That's certainly the traditional view, and there's good supporting evidence for it. But this is a unusual Indian set. Mostly I'm showing you the typical sets, but this is unusual because it's got these particular figures. What is usual in India is that the rook is an elephant. Now you noticed that before I was saying the bishop figure was an elephant in other chesses. For some reason the rook became the elephant in the Indian form. And this is a rather elaborate ashtapada. It's the traditional Indian form of a chessboard. Notice it's not checkered like ours is. This one is elaborate, I say, because it's got this very special golden ribbon, which makes it beautiful. But look at these little markings on the side. Nobody actually knows what those markings mean. They probably had something to do with how the game was played, or maybe how a former game was played a long time ago. But the markings still exist for whatever reason. And this kind of chessboard is sometimes used in India, but not so much. The international form of chess is much more popular nowadays. But amazing chess culture, even understanding that the origins of chess are hard to pin down. India has so many variants, and it's such a hotbed of diversity in chess that it's extraordinary and has much to offer anybody who's learning about the evolution and diversity of chess. Now, let's see. I wanted to cover this one. This is actually probably made, this is a copy, of course, but the original, it's called the Charlemagne chess set, but Charlemagne probably didn't play chess. But back in the old days, nobody was really sure what, they didn't have such good information. So this was called the Charlemagne chess set. In reality, it was probably made in Italy in the 11th century, which for European chess is very old. I mean, that's like shortly after chess really started coming into Europe. So this is a very old style, and the interesting thing about this is these figures, not so much the king and queen, but the elephant, the knight, and the chariot are very much like figures that have been found around ancient Persia and Uzbekistan, the place where the oldest chess pieces in the world have been excavated. However, even though this is very old, still, that's, quite a few centuries. This is like, maybe 4 centuries after those other pieces in Persia existed or were actually played with. So, the Charlemagne chessmen, and as I was saying, this is a very nice reproduction, but if you want to see the original, go to the Library of Paris and check it out. Now, of the hundreds of variants that I could show you, I want to just show you a couple because they're exemplary. This is a Chinese game. It's a new edition of a traditional game that's more than 100 years old. It's apparently derived from the Chinese chess, but it's made simple for children. There's little animals, and the board shows you where the animals go. Elephant goes here, lion goes here. It's all laid out. And instead of trying to get the king who is confined, or the general, as it may be, who is confined to a fortress,
you just try to get one of your pieces into the enemy fortress or the lion's den or the animal's den. And you have water to go around. You move one space sideways, forward or backward. This game is very closely related to Stratego, the popular game in the West, which was also related to a former game called L'attaque. And it's also related to some Chinese games, in particular a game called xiangqi, which is basically the same, played on the lines as this is played on the lines, with little tiles with Chinese characters. So there's a whole family of games that is related to this game, and they're probably derived from chess, quite possibly from Chinese chess, although while this family of games seem to arise both in China and in Europe about the same time, we really can't be sure. Now, here's a very recent development in chess. This is called Loka, and you can see it's got a similarity to the ancient form chaturaji, 4 different armies playing against each other, and yet it's got dice, which is also similar, but this game is more tied in with modern board games that kids like to play. It's sort of related to Pokemon and all those card games that seem to derive from Dungeons and Dragons and all that. There's, when you attack another player, you don't just capture them, you have to power up to decide how powerful you are. Then according to that you roll the die that represents your power level, and then you either win or lose the battle. And there are other things, there are little squares that go in here that change the terrain. Before the game you bid on which pieces you want to use, so you may be playing with, for instance, a queen against a bishop and knight, and then all these pieces are very artistically created. Of all the variants that have come out, this one most impresses me just with its artistry, as well as its thought about incorporating aspects of different games and historic forms of chess. So, Loka, a wonderful new thing to come out. So let's take the big view here now. I've got 6 books I'd like to show you, which to me are especially symbolic of this whole chess interest. First one, R.C. Bell, Board and Table Games of Many Civilizations. This is what I picked up when I was a young, impressionable teenager. And when I discovered that this game that I was quite interested in, chess, actually had all this history and all these variants throughout time, I was fascinated. That became my window into the world of cultural history. And I would make chess games and these games. There's also a lot of encouragement in this book to build your own. Back in the 70s, you couldn't just get things on the internet like you can nowadays. So if I took a trip to Chinatown, I was looking for a Chinese chess set. That's a big deal. It still is a big deal for me now. But this is the book that got me started. Thanks. Once I was introduced to the history of chess, I had to get Murray's History of Chess. This is the Bible of chess history. It was published just over 100 years ago, 1913. H.J.R. Murray. It is such a dense and thorough collection of what was possible to know in those days about the history of chess. You see, and it includes the variants. It's got the Chinese chess. It's got most of the variants I showed you here. And it's got, dense. It's dense with footnotes and different languages and diagrams from manuscripts gone by. Wonderful book. Still the Bible of chess history, although like any old document, there are many things that have been updated by modern research, which you won't find in this old book, but amazing, amazing work. One of the first books ever printed in the English language on a printing press was printed in Bruges. In fact, the first book ever printed was kind of forgettable. It was some history of Troy. But this book is a classic. It was first printed in 1474. A few years later, reprinted with these famous block prints. What I have in my hands is a reprinting from 1883. Look at these crusty looking pages here, okay? Now look at this. This is some medieval stuff, okay? That's a picture of a fellow chopping his father into pieces and feeding him to vultures. And that's how this story of chess starts out. Among all the evil conditions and signs that may be in a man, the first and the greatest is when he feareth not, nay, dreadeth to displease and make wroth by God, sin. And it goes on to explain how this very evil fellow cut his father up into pieces so he could take over the kingdom, and then his evil temperament was soothed and rectified by Xerxes, who invented chess and taught him how to play it, and taught him the inherent values of chess, and that is what the rest of the book goes on to describe. This book is a translation, a recreation of a book that was actually first printed in the late 13th century and became the most copied book in Europe next to the Bible. So, huge in medieval Europe. Another thing I want to show you is the Alfonso X manuscript, Alfonso X. This is an English translation, modern English translation of huge collection of games, including chess. This is a 4-player chess, and it shows many variants. And as I was saying, variants of chess have been widespread consistently. I'm mostly showing you here almost exclusively the mainstream chess, but they would expand, they would contract, they would change, they would come back together. Alfonso X manuscript, it's 13th century. Now let me show you something more contemporary. The Classified Encyclopedia of Chess Variants. For those of us who really want to know all about where chess has been and what it's become, cataloged thematically here. This work was collected by D.B. Pritchard. This book has unfortunately gone out of print recently. There's only a few copies still available, but it will be available, I'm told, in electronic form afterwards, so thank goodness. Finally, and this is of the greatest importance, Jean-Louis Cazot has written many books about chess history and history of board games. He's not just a historian of chess or a researcher, he's a meta-researcher. He looks at all the various research and all the assertions about where games came from and what the actual evidence is. Then he puts it together into this extraordinary book, The Odyssey of Chess Games, and it tells you how to play them, and also it tells you about the history. Now, unfortunately for us English speakers, this is in French. Fortunately for us English speakers, I, Rick Knowlton, am working together with Jean-Louis Cazot on a new translation and updating of this book, which will probably come out sometime in 2015. Look for it. It's going to be good. So, thanks very much for checking this out, and go to my website. I will teach you how to play all these games that you see here. I will show you more sets. Most of these sets that you see here are actually for sale and available. There's a lot more. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Send me an email. I like to have a lot of personal contact with people who find this interesting, have any questions or input about the history of chess the variants of chess, just the excitement of the world of chess. Thanks.